Welcome to our final Bills and Bagels of the session. I'm pretty sure we'll get some more people coming in late. As you can see, we've changed locations from the school district office to here. There was a conflict of a problem at the school district this morning, and that's why we needed to change. But next session, we'll be back to the district offices. So. My name is Carrie Malkovich. I am a council member of the City of Woodland Hills, and we just would like you to welcome you here. Thank you for being here, being engaged in the legislative process. We ask you to please silence your cell phones. We have SF-17 here to record for us. They take time to be here and to show it on their channel for the rest of the month of the legislative session, so that the residents of Spanish Fork can find out what's happening in South Utah County. Again, if you haven't had an opportunity, please get some breakfast or at least take some home with you afterwards. We want to recognize our sponsor of the breakfast is Scott Barlow here with Revere Health. Revere Health, under the direction of Scott Barlow and his team that are here. We really appreciate them providing us breakfast every year, and I hope that you find it tasty. Somebody else making you breakfast this morning. We also would like to acknowledge the Spanish Fork, Salem, Springville, Mapleton, and Payson Santaquin chambers. If their leadership is here, would you please stand, or any of their board members, chamber board, or executive directors? Yeah, that's all of you. I know. I kept thinking, okay. So anyways, we want to thank them and our business community for supporting, and then for Rick Nielsen and the rest of the team at the Nebo School District. Those are our sponsors of this event, and we really appreciate all they do. We'd also like to recognize any other elected officials here. If you're city, county, state, or federal, would you please stand up? Mayor Mendenhall, that would be you and your team. And Sheriff Smith. And yes, Mayor Winder, are you here? Yes. All right, and then of course school board members. So thank you all for being here as well. We will start our day with the pledge, Bree Smith, and then pledge first, and then prayer by Karen Ellingson, and then recognizing our timekeeper, Tyler Moore here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our Heavenly Father, we are grateful this day for the chance to meet together and to discuss the issues that are facing our state at this time, and to hear from our elected officials and their efforts to address these issues. We are grateful for the freedoms and liberties and opportunities that we have, and we ask Thee to bless those who are working on these issues with guidance and direction and the ability to make the best decisions for our state. And we ask Thee to bless all that are here with the insight to understand and to advocate for our freedoms. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
All right, we'd like to recognize our legislators who are here. Jeff Burton from District 64. Well, so we changed the number. Oh, okay, I did change it on my notes. And then Stephen White from District 63, Senator McKell from 25, Senator Hinkins from 26. He comes all the way from Farron and Orangeville to join us this morning. We really appreciate that. Representative Thurston from District 62, Representative Welton from District 65. We will excuse Senator Darren Owens. He takes just the very small part of the south part of the county in Santaquin, and he has to drive from like Fountain Green. So we excuse him today. But I was really surprised. Our three senators have divided Little Santaquin into thirds. So those of you who are here from Santaquin, recognize you have three senators. Amazing. You should get a lot. You should ask for a lot because you got 3 powerful senators in your midst. As you know, for those of you who have been here before, we do this in kind of a town hall format. Each legislator is going to go by and give us an opening statement of how they think the legislative session is working, how their bills are doing. They're wearing 2 mics, one for the television, and then they'll be passing this hand mic around in case you need to hear them a little better if they're not talking loud enough. All of you have pens and paper on your table. If you have a question for them, please write it on the paper, write which representative you would like it to go to, and then just hold it up and I'll come and get it and deliver it to them. With that, I want to thank them for being here, and let's start with you, Representative Burton.
All right, good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here with you. Jeff Burton, I am the representative for Spanish Fork, Woodland Hills, Salem, Lakeshore, and parts of Benjamin. And I'm going into my 3rd year. I retired from the military after 38 years and decided I still had a little something to give. And so I ran for this office. Currently serving as the chair of the Executive Offices and Criminal Justice Appropriations Committee. Also serve on the Business and Labor Committee and the Criminal Justice Law Enforcement Committee. I have a wife and 3 children, all of whom are grown. And the best part about my life is my next door neighbor is my daughter and her 4 grandkids. So that's kind of fun.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen White, and welcome to House District 63. I have the privilege of serving this area of Springville, Mapleton, and part of Spanish Fork with Representative Burton. Thank you for all coming out early this morning. It's wonderful to see so many friends and leaders, community members. This is my 2nd session. I have the opportunity to serve on Business and Labor, Law Enforcement, Criminal Justice, and Business Economic Development Labor Committee with Senator McHale, who chairs that committee. And I want to thank all the colleagues up here for the united work and the great camaraderie and the teamwork that is taking place with all of you. We just reached our halfway mark of the session this week. And so we're on the downhill slide, and there's a lot of exciting things that are taking place. A lot of bills that have already been passed. There's a lot that are being discussed and debated right now. Based upon all of your input, we're collectively working on some really important issues right now, but also for our children and our grandchildren in the future, primarily in kind of 3 areas, kind of policy pillars. The first one is the category of stewardship. And so in that category of stewardship, needing to safeguard our natural resources of water and energy and land management. The second big category for bills are affordability, to keep Utah affordable, especially in the areas of housing, with government overreach and with taxes. And the third area for bills that are really moving forward right now is investments, investing now for our future in transportation and in education. So it's a privilege to be with all of you this morning. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you, Representative White. Thank you for coming out this morning. I was a little worried in this new location that we wouldn't have as many people as we have. This is fantastic. I know the mayor of Santaquin, we do joke with him that he has 3 senators. We had a chance to recognize him on the Senate floor. He had to take off to work on budgets this morning. It's remarkable the work that our public officials are doing. At the end of this week, we actually completed our budgets. Our Executive Appropriations Committee is going to take those budgets. One of the most important things we do when we start the session, we balance our budgets. Oftentimes we take credit for having a balanced budget. It's actually constitutional. That's one of those things I wish we had with the federal government. But I do chair the Business and Economic Development Appropriations Subcommittee. I'm on the Higher Education Committee. I'm on the Public Education Committee and the Economic Development Standing Committee. Been up there 11 years. It's really good having you here. We look forward to answering questions this morning. Thank you.
I'm Senator Hinkins, and I live in Farron, Utah, like I said, and I represent the southeastern Utah for the most part. I have Carbon, Emery, Grand, San Juan. I also have half of Wayne County, Kane County, and Garfield County, and then I have portions of Wasatch County, Daniel, Charleston, and Timberlake, and then in Utah County I have Mapleton, Springville, and Santaquin. And we're trying to get an appropriation for Santaquin right now, so it's going to take probably all 3 senators to get it done, so and all our House members, so thanks.
Yeah, I'm Norm Thurston, representative for District 62. It goes more or less from downtown Provo to downtown Springville. So includes, in Springville, it's the west side, so the west fields, I guess is the correct terminology, and then the part of Springville that's behind McDonald's. So if you live in one of those areas, you know what I'm talking about. Senator McHale mentioned budgets. This week has been budget week. I'm the Vice Chair of Public Education Appropriations. And one of the things that you will see different if you pay attention to budget this year, we were very deliberate about holding the line on things that have statewide interest. So our public education appropriations, we had 75 budget requests. The vast majority of those were for books for Ogden or a program for Logan or whatever. We rolled all of that money up and gave it to the local school districts and said, here's a bunch of money. You can buy books, you can do this program, you can do what you want, but avoiding kind of micromanaging at the local level. So you'll see, I think you'll see that across the budgets this year. A lot less micromanaging through the budget process and a lot more flexibility and just giving the money back to the people that gave it to us in the first place. So I'll let Senator McHale later brag about the tax cut. The Senate can take credit for that, even though we're the ones that will do it. So.
Okay. Hi, my name is Doug Welton. I represent South Utah County, essentially Payson, Elk Ridge, Santaquin, Salem, West Mountain, Spring Lake. Hopefully I didn't miss anybody. This is also my third year, second term, third year. I'd like to echo what Representative Thurston said about holding the line. I'm really grateful that we have some strong principles in place to make sure that we're not just funding very niche requests, and that we're looking at issues that are statewide and trying to make sure that we're using your money effectively. I think that's an important thing that we do. We are going to have some tax cuts coming up. A couple things about me. I serve on the Transportation Committee and working really hard to get some of the public infrastructure needs that we have down in our area. There's anticipated tremendous amounts of growth as in all of Utah County, and it was very important to me that we have that public partnership between the state and the local level. I also serve on Government Operations Committee, Higher Ed Appropriations, and some of the issues that are really important to me are just making sure that we have some more transparency and some accountability with our local governments. And then public safety is an area that I've been working on. One of the things I found this session is there's a lot of people that have great ideas, and there's a lot of duplicated ideas, and my best ideas have been taken up by the Senate already, so we're just hoping to make them better.
All right, thank you, everyone. I have a few cards here that I'm going to pass out, but if you have more, make sure you put their name on it and keep asking the questions so that they have something to talk about. All right.
Okay, so we've got, Doug and I are going to share this one because we are on opposite sides of this issue. I will give my thoughts and he'll give his thoughts. All comment please, but you're just going to get me and Doug. That's sorry. No need for new flags, right? So can we just do a quick poll before I answer this question? How many of you would like to change the state flag? How many of you think the one we have is just fine and would love to keep it? Okay, you guys kind of look like the legislature right now. So, yeah, so my position is there are flag designs that I would, in theory, support changing to. The one that's being proposed that came from the Senate is not one I would support. It's pretty far from one I would support, but that's where we are. So, but I am open-minded to the idea of potentially coming up with a really great state flag in the future, but that's where I am for now. Now, I'm going to let Doug present an opposing point of view.
Well, first of all, let me say it on the state flag. When I first heard about this 3 years ago, prior to being elected, I thought it was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard in my life. I'm like, what are we spending our time and our money and our efforts for? Since then, I started looking at the concepts of good flag design. I drive up and down our streets. In fact, I was watching as I come in. I see lots of American flags. I see POW flags. I see law enforcement flags. I see pride flags. You know what I don't see? I don't see any Utah flags. You know, for a flag that we love, like I just don't see any Utah flags. And when I ask somebody to describe the flag, almost zero can actually describe everything that's on the flag and the numbers. And you know, we have 2 numbers on the flag. We have 2 words on the flag. And so I'm not 100% opposed or in favor of the flag, but I do think that it's worthy of considering and having something that we can fly. I appreciate the input. There's been a lot of public input into the flag, certainly more so than the original flag that had no public input.
What's the cost?
Anyway, the initial cost, I believe, was $50,000 for the design, and the fiscal note came out as $0 because, and that was a concern that I had initially, but the flags are replaced every 3 months that fly. And so all you do is you replace, you just order a different flag and put up a new one. So.
Yeah, so there is certainly, when we do our fiscal notes, maybe this is just a kind of educational, we do our fiscal notes, we only include in the cost of the bill the impact to state government. We don't include the cost to local government. Mayors and sheriffs and everybody knows about unfunded mandates. We do that all the time. We pass laws that have it.
I don't.
Some of us do. So it happens all the time, but that's not included. There's probably a comment in there that talks about how this may impact schools or other people, but we don't have to pay for that, and so it comes out as a zero fiscal note. But I recognize that there is an adjustment cost. My preference would be this year, if this is what we really want to do, that we put it on the ballot and have a binding referendum. We don't do that very often, and I take that pretty seriously. But this is one of those where it affects enough people in enough ways that we ought to put it on the ballot if we're going to really do that and not just pass it with 38 votes in the House. That might not be the best way of doing this particular.
And as each of you are answering your questions, if you would like to also answer something about the flag, feel free to do so.
All right, I've got a question. I recently released a bill, Senate Bill 199. This deals with referendums. Let me start by saying this. Utah is not California, okay? Utah is not California. And I say that because in California does a lot of policy through referendum. They do a lot of policy through ballot initiatives. We are a constitutional republic, and that's the principle that I'm looking at when I look at referendums. So in the legislature, if we have an item that passes with a constitutional majority, that can't go on a ballot as a referendum. So we've taken that principle down to cities and counties with roads, and I've got a bill that would do that with land use. What I'm worried about right now in the state is we are weaponizing referendum. We have a very serious affordable housing crisis in the state. We have private property rights, and using referendum to weaponize issues across the state. We've seen it across the state. We've seen it in South Utah County, and I've got a bill that would deal with that. I don't like the way California makes policy. I think that's why we have elected representatives. So what the bill would say is if you've got a supermajority through a local city council, local county commission, that issue can't go on a ballot for a ballot referendum. So that's what Senate Bill 199 is. We've started having that discussion, but that was the question here.
The question was asked, what is Utah doing to ensure sustainability with all of the growth? That is the great million-dollar question right now. We have the fastest growing population within the state. A lot of that is happening on the urban front, the Wasatch Front, but also in different aspects of the different communities. There's St. George, Utah County, and Salt Lake are the fastest growing counties. And Utah County right here is the fastest growing in the state. So we're kind of the epicenter for population growth, everything that's taking place here. So the plan is really multi-pronged. It reaches into housing, it reaches into land preservation, preserving agricultural space, it touches into healthcare, to education. Everything is just so interconnected, and with transportation and infrastructure as well. So there are a variety of bills this session that are touching upon each of one of those things. And so the answer is yes, we have to sustain and continue what we're doing and also plan for the future with all the growth that will be coming over the next couple of decades, so we can preserve our quality of life and the prosperity that we're having. In fact, the question was also asked related to that, is there a plan to preserve open space and agricultural land? And yes, there is, and we need to do that. Agriculture is an important aspect of the economy, but also the history of the state. We need to preserve those open spaces. And so there's plans and bills and discussions about how to do that to accommodate the growth, the population that's coming, but also letting counties and cities be able to plan and zone accordingly as well. And Senator Hinkins has done a lot of work specifically in the agricultural space. Do you want to comment on that piece of it?
Yeah, the state started a Leroy McAllister Fund back in the 90s, and what this does is it allows to take federal dollars and match it with local, either state or local dollars to set aside agricultural or land that won't be developed so that there's green space. And so they've been doing that for 20 plus years, 25 years or so. And the state, as a state, we haven't been participating as much lately, but they're asking, I think it's $5 or $7 million. I think $7 million one time, $5 million ongoing into this fund. Then is to try to get the federal dollars that other states. Maine uses a lot of it, and upstate New York and a lot of places like that. But the West is kind of new in it to some degree. But they've been doing that for agriculture as well as mountain land, so that we have to protect our watersheds. So there's just not cabins up there. There will be places for the water to collect and come down to the valley. So, and while we're on that, we have the big question is the Great Salt Lake, and both of these questions that I have here is what are we doing for the Great Salt Lake? Last year we appropriated $40 million directly to do that, and it's going to look like it's going to be over $250 million going into an optimization plan, which allows agriculture to upgrade their irrigation facilities from flood irrigation to sprinkler irrigation. And so a lot of the plans, not everybody agrees with it. I'm one that disagrees with it, because when you start conserving water upstream, the water doesn't get downstream. It stays in the reservoirs, which that's what we really want. But to get it into the Great Salt Lake, you actually have to be reckless with water and actually to get it to overuse it so that it floods back into the Great Salt Lake. And probably the ones that needs to worry about is the Utah Lake and the Utah watershed, because going into a Dead Sea isn't probably the best beneficial use for our water. I mean, we're still going to need water for growing food and sanitary purposes and other things like that. So we are trying to do what we can, but in my opinion, it's pretty much in God's hands of how much rain and water we get for the Great Salt Lake. So prayers and prayers, I guess, mostly. So.
Did you guys get a chance?
It's pretty clear to see that politicians are not short on words. We love to talk. And so, just real quick, the first question: what are you doing? What are we doing collectively to help encourage civility and build community? I think you can all be proud of the fact that the state of Utah is different. We have 14 Democrats in the House, and I don't know how many you have in the Senate, Senator, but and then 61 Republicans in the House. But we communicate well. We're friends. We aren't uncivil to one another, even though we disagree fundamentally on most topics. But we get along, and I think in Utah we show trust and kindness to people, even when we don't get along. We can still talk to each other. It's said that Americans are losing faith in the institutions, the civil society, I call it. And I think we have a tough job of making sure that we deserve respect. People in position of authority deserve respect because they act respectfully. And I think that's what we try to do in the Utah legislature. If you want to get respect, you have to give respect. And then the other question I had was simply about what is the state support for the Provo Airport? Norm, you can probably answer this better than I, but I can tell you that we have, hello Matt Bedell out there. We used to work together. We have appropriated money in the past to help the Provo Airport. I know they have a request in this year. I can't say yet where that's going to go because the budgets were just approved by the subcommittees. The Executive Appropriations Committee will decide if they're going to invest more into the Provo airport. But that is a growing concern out there. And how many of you have flown out of that airport? It's a pretty good little airport. They've done a good job. And so it's likely that they'll get a little bit more funding from us. Let's see, I know I'm out of time, but there was another one.
Well, if you have another question, your time starts over. Just
Okay,
so you guys
so
know,
the third-
don't answer them all under one time. You get extra time for each question you get.
Oh, okay, whatever. All right, I'll wait on this one. Thank you. Norm, if you want to talk about Provo.
All right, I'll do two in one here. So this Provo Airport is not an international airport. You cannot fly to Cabo or Cancun just yet. It opened in July of this year, so it's now 6 months into its operations. The state paid a hefty amount of money to help build that terminal, and it's been successful beyond anybody's wildest imaginations. Allegiant wants to fly to Cabo and Cancun out of Provo, but in order to do that, they need to have an inspection station. So when you're coming back from Mexico, there's a place to do that. So they're asking for $15 million this year for us to build that, which is kind of crazy because we just built it. It just barely got built, but now we need to add an international unit on it, which is phenomenal. So I don't know. I have no influence on that level of funding. Somebody on Beetle or IGG would have to help get that over the line. But it's a huge benefit. It pulls in passengers all the way from Salt Lake County, and even we're hearing some from Weber County that are coming down to fly out of Provo because it just makes more sense for the places that they're going. I've flown out of Provo, I've flown to Arizona, and I flew to San Francisco. It's just so nice. It's just so nice to be able to just do that and not have to walk for 18 miles to get to your plane. Okay, restart on another question. So school taxes. What are you doing to rein in over-the-top spending? School districts raise our property taxes year after year after year. So two thoughts on this one. One is that's how the system is set up. So the schools are funded as a partnership between the local government, the schools, and they fund their part through property taxes, and the state government, we fund our part through the income tax. And we do that together as a partnership. So there are two things that we're doing this year to help reduce the need for districts to raise property taxes quite so much. One is called equalization. I think if you figure it out, if you're doing property tax and you're Salt Lake City, there's a lot more commercial property that you can tax and raise a ton of money. Or if you're Park City, the amount of property, the value of property per child in the Park City School District is something like 25 times what it is in the Nebo School District. It's just ridiculous. So equalization makes sure that as a state, we make sure that you don't get winners and losers based on geography, that you don't have kids that are just the beneficiaries of the fact that they live in Salt Lake City and there's a ton of commercial property. So we take those property taxes, a big chunk of those, and equalize those across. Both Provo and Nebo are net recipients of equalization funding, and we're working continually on that one so that the lower valued school districts can keep up with the other ones. The other one is this year we're going to allocate $175 million, I hope it stays in, for school districts to be able to address capital needs, building issues that they would normally have to fund out of property tax, and we're hoping to give them flexibility to do that. So I hope, and I want to talk to Sean about this later to make sure we're on the right page. So
how long has equalization been around?
As long as I've been around. But it was never really a big thing. We're getting to the point now where there's only a handful, maybe 10 districts left that are paying into equalization. The rest are getting it out, which means we're getting close to the end of the road.
Yeah. One thing on the property tax as well too, it's I think 5 years ago the legislature froze the rate. I'm not sure what the reasoning was. I wasn't there then. And that's actually kind of capped property taxes at a higher level, as you've known, as property values have gone up. That's going away. That ended this year, and so that portion will be gone as well, and that will help out with your property tax prices. Okay, question is, why did you vote yes on 215 when it clearly conflicts with the Utah Constitution rule of one bill cannot contain two separate agendas? And then a follow-up on public school funds should not fund private or home schools. This will destroy autonomy for both. So this is a tough question. As a public educator, obviously I have a high interest level in the outcomes that we have in our school district. I think our schools do a phenomenal job educating our kids. And this was a difficult a vote for me. To the specific question about conflicting, the title of the bill is funding for, it's basically school funding. And so funding teachers, funding programs, that all falls under, at least as far as our attorneys listed it. The sponsor of the bill checked with the attorneys and found that there was no conflict there. Now, I've talked before in previous meetings, I think our process was bad. I think those bills should have been split personally, and I think there should have been more time for public engagement. This is one of those places where I felt like the state looked like Washington, D.C. a little bit in the way we pushed these bills through. As far as the funding goes, there's certainly a concern with the split. One of the pieces that we were able to get in part of this HB 215 is that there's some accountability for public funds. So people are using your tax dollars to fund public education. We have accountability there, and they're using tax dollars to fund the backpack funding, so to speak, where the funding goes to the kid. And so we put some accountability measures in there. As far as destroying the autonomy of both, that's certainly a concern that a lot of people have. Our homeschool crowd is kind of worried about encroachment of the government. The easy way to address that is you just don't take the backpack funding. You don't take the HB 215 funding. You continue to do your own thing. And that's the way I would address that.
I would also like to give Doug some credit. Sometimes in politics, you negotiate a better deal than the one you want to, but then you have to vote for it. And Doug was very key in making sure that some of those key provisions were included in House Bill 215. So I want to give Doug credit for negotiating a better deal, but then the downside of that is that you have to vote for it.
Jump in on that one.
Okay, I've got a couple here. The main one I think here is, it says with building all around Santaquin, what are we doing to ensure enough water? You know, the Central Utah Water Project, the South Juab County and the south part of Utah County has not got their portion of that yet. And so most of it all ended up in Salt Lake, and of course, like everything else. And we are going to, it's just like Duchesne, they were just entitled to getting projects out of the Central Utah Water Project, and they've never, and they're the ones giving up the water, basically. And they've never been, their projects have never been fulfilled, but we are working on trying to get the Central Utah Water Project south, and so I think that'll help with some of the water issues that would be in the south part of the county. The other one is I represent coal country, and one of the gentlemen or person has been to some districts meetings, and they've talked about how we're going to have increase in costs of electricity as well as and a lot of it's attributed to going to cleaner, greener energy that's not so green and clean sometimes. And as you guys know, as ratepayers, we've spent over $600 million just on the bag houses on the Hunter Power Plant to improve the air quality. And I drive by it 2 or 3 times a day when I'm in my normal working environment. And I work in Orangeville and I live in Farron, so I drive by the Hunter Power Plant every day several times. And it's very clean, and we're really going to pay for it in the long run. Natural gas, we've been very fortunate that it's been under $2 million cubic feet for the last 20 years, but has been over $6 pretty consistently for the last year. And coal is, normally we've been paying around $45 to $50 a ton for coal. The one mine in Huntington Canyon now is exporting coal at $180 a ton. And so you can see that if you're going to buy the Utah coal, you're going to have to, because of we have not developed any new projects, and we've actually, when I first started my business in 1976, there was 40 coal mines within the Price service area. Which is somewhat New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, but now we're down to like 6 mines just in the Carbon-Emery area. The other one was why did I vote for SCR 9, which was the Halloween law, or Halloween bill, and I don't really care for Halloween. I guess I've done it in spite of it.
So I also voted, for the Halloween bill failed in the Senate. It was never going to make it through. We had a very fun debate. President Adams gave me the gavel for the first time, and I actually got to conduct that debate, and it was pretty hilarious. Little jack-o'-lanterns with candy. We all knew it wasn't going to pass. Sometimes we bring issues for our constituents. Senator Collimore had a constituent group of moms that thought, hey, we should do a resolution that says we should trick or treat on the last Friday in October. That's why he ran that bill. I don't think there was ever any intention to actually pass the bill, but he wanted to give a voice to some of his constituents. Let me give an update on just some transportation projects. I had a question about transportation in South Utah County. I talked about this last week, but I did phone a friend, and I had Shane Marshall gave me an update on one of the projects. If you don't know Shane, he's an engineer. He's on Spanish Fork City Council, and we take advantage of his skill set as an engineer, but he was also a deputy director for UDOT. And for those in Spanish Fork, that's a really big win that we've got somebody with that amount of UDOT experience. So question was about the interchange, Springville, Spanish Fork. It's nice that we're here today. That project, last session, as the economy started to spin and things started to get more expensive, we were about $40 million upside down in the last budget. Shane and Spanish Fork City and Springville all came to the legislature. We've got some additional funding to get that funded. I did phone a friend with Shane. I think we're breaking ground this summer, so you'll start to see some progress there. But let me tell you about just some other projects in the valley that I think are important. The other one is on Highway 6 with the rail relocation. Rail crossings are a problem. We've lost several lives due to rail crossings on Highway 6, and we got some money last session. We're seeking a federal grant. It's called a CRISI grant, in addition to $35 million to buy out Union Pacific and make those connections between Mapleton, Spanish Fork, and Springville better. As we work our way south, the big project that we've been fighting for down in the far end of the valley is Santaquin. Senator Hinkins and I and Senator Owens all represent Santaquin. Their off-ramp is failing at this point, so we're trying to get the study money to bump up that project. I always compare it to North Main Street in Lehigh Main Street. If you remember how bad that was, that's where Santaquin is going right now, so we're trying to fix that. As we move up the valley, Payson has an off-ramp that they want to get done. They've been negotiating with the church. The church has a lot of ground there. UVU has a lot of ground. That's a project that needs to get done. Last session, we got some money for Spanish Fork Center Street. That's going to come. That was the study money. So in the future, we'll have to go get that fully funded. But I think those are the big ones in South Utah County that we're looking at right now.
Thank you. The question was asked, we're concerned with the divisiveness that we're seeing in government. What can be done? I don't know if you felt that way as well. I have to tell you, when I started serving the legislature this last year, I was wondering, what is the experience going to be like? Is this going to be like what we're seeing in DC and the federal side of things? And at the end of the last session, I walked away pleasantly surprised of how things are done here in Utah is not the way that we're seeing things happen back in the federal government. Being able to literally work together. For example, I'll give you a couple examples. We're addressing a big issue right now with housing affordability in the state. There's questions about what to be done with zoning and with open space and with cities and with counties. The the Spanish Fork delegation here, mayor, the city administrator, the city council, they have been so invaluable helping me get the information of working and representing cities with the ULOC cities and towns, plus with developers and everyone else. It's literally coming together around the table with people that have completely different points of view, who are adamantly debating against each other, working together to come to a solution that will be able to help. So that's just one example. Another example, there was a bill that ran recently by a Democrat who wanted to provide more school nurses in each of the schools. And seeing that this bill is coming forward, visiting with the Nebo School District, I learned that the Nebo School District had concerns with this, reached out to the superintendent and expressed those concerns. And he said, I'd be happy to visit with this representative. Visiting with the representative, I'd be happy to visit with the superintendent. So we got together different points of view, but it was wonderful. The Democratic representative said, I hadn't even considered what you were just sharing with me, Superintendent Nelson, and I'd be happy to make those adjustments to make this work throughout the state. So I thought, what a great example of school, like this situation, the superintendent with the Democratic representative who are looking at different things to come together with a solution that works. And we talk about that sometimes as the Utah way, what we're doing here and the way we're trying to collectively work together will be able to help us so we don't experience some of the things that we're seeing in other parts of the country. So thanks for asking that question.
Thanks, Stephen. Was asked about taxes really quick, so I'll touch on those. From the House of Representatives, what we're working on right now with tax cuts, we did a bunch of surveys, both statewide and in the district, and primarily what came back was that you want income tax reduction, and so we're looking at a 20 basis point income tax reduction, as well as right now in Utah, if you're on Social Security and you make less than $40,000 a year, your Social Security is not taxed by the state. We're looking at upping that to $80,000 a year to not tax your Social Security. And then finally, one of the things that I'm pushing, and others, there's actually a bill out there, is I'd like an assessor audit. Many of you had a huge steep incline in your property tax, and then your neighbor maybe didn't have a steep incline property tax. And so we need to look at the practices of the assessor and how they're deciding what your property's worth. And then finally, is there enough water in Utah County? That was the other question. Is there enough? And I will tell you, we're blessed in Utah County for a state. Within the state of Utah, we have a lot of water in Utah County. In my role as an Army engineer before, in my previous life, if you could see the water underneath the Lake Shore Benjamin area, there's another lake underneath the lake. There's so much water under there. And so we're blessed with water here in Utah County, but we've got some real challenges with getting the water to the lake. Lake Shore Benjamin are flooded right now. If you live out there, you know what I'm talking about. And so there's got to be significant work in that area to get the water into the lake, more dredging to make that happen. So we have water in Utah County, but obviously for the whole state, water is a concern. And we're looking at every possible way we can. And then the equation is what falls out of the sky, and then how we save the water. And so, as Senator Hinkins said, we can't control what falls out of the sky. But I think, by and large, Utah's got a pretty good plan with regard to water. We can't escape growth, but what we have to do is manage it the very best that we can. What none of us want is another Eagle Mountain where you can't get in and you can't get out. And so that's why Senator McKell and others have been working so hard on infrastructure and road construction ahead of the curve. And I think we're doing a pretty good job down here in South Utah County.
Oh, down here. Okay. Let's see. I've got two questions there. First one, can we count on you to oppose HB 150 and similar emergency power grabs? I might ask Senator McKell to weigh in on this one as well, too, as the Senate sponsor. But in its initial form, this has been through two substitutes. This is one that initially it was not one that I would have supported. What happens sometimes is we get these bills, and in the current status, these powers already exist, and what this bill actually does is rein them in a little bit. It reins them in a lot. And so it actually is kind of addressing the concern here is that we have this overreach of executive powers, and that actually already exists, and so this just reins them in a little bit. I don't know if you want to speak more to that.
I can talk to you about it really quick. So House Bill 150 is not a scary bill. I've got two questions on it. Again, it's not a scary bill. It's not a conspiracy. I get emails on House Bill 150 asking if this is UN Agenda 2030. What it is we're in a drought. We have problems with water. And what Representative Albrecht is trying to do is prioritize water. If there comes a day where we all have water rights. I've got water shares water rights, but if there comes a day we have to prioritize water, are we going to allow that water to go to you for drinking water, for cattle, for drinking water? We've got to create an order. I hope we never have to use it. I don't think we ever will have to use it. But one of the questions I had, and I'm going to hit this in a minute, when we're digesting information, how do we know what's true and what's not? It's always a great question. But again, House Bill 150 is not Agenda 2030. It's not scary. What we're trying to do is have an order. Again, if the sky truly does fall and we have sustained drought, we've got to be able to prioritize water for you. I mean, we would prioritize your drinking water first, so we'd all survive. But that's what it is. So let's go back there.
I'd like to just add to that a little bit. You up here on the Wasatch Front have really not had to share your water, but where I live at in Emery County, we share our water, and all the power production in Utah pretty much comes from the water from Joes Valley and the Millsite Reservoir. And so we actually run into this situation where that prioritization, so I mean, municipals get the first option on it, but electrical generation has not been part of that. But we've always, but we've dealt with it for the last 50 years with the power plants down there, and so we lease it to them. But it's they're really not a framework for that. We've been doing it because money, buys water. Pretty much water used to flow downhill, now it flows to money, and so we're pretty well. This is a framework for us to be able to make sure that they actually compensate us for it. That it's not just a taking.
Okay, I have a question here about affordable housing. What are we doing to address housing affordability? So I get to put on my professor hat on this one just for a minute. So economics is the study of the allocation of scarce goods and resources. And what happens in housing is if you have more people who want houses than you have houses, the only thing that needs to get decided at that point is who gets the houses. And the market will figure that all out. And of course, that leaves some people out, right? At the end of the day, there are fewer seats in the theater that people want to go. Some people get to see the movie and some people don't. So this is the problem that we have with housing affordability. It's just summed up in one simple question. We have to have more houses. If we have more people to want houses than we have houses, somehow we have to figure out how to get more houses. So what are we doing to address housing affordability? We are looking at every possible way that we can think of to allow more houses to be built without trampling on local autonomy for zoning and other things. But we just simply need to build more houses. And there's no other solution. There's no other magic thing. Anything else that you do will change who gets the houses, but it doesn't solve the problem. So you could say, well, we can give low-income people a bunch of money so they can be a first-time home buyer. Well, that's great. Now they're going to get a house and somebody else isn't, right? It doesn't solve the problem. So the only solution to this problem is straight up more houses. Pretty simple. Where are we going? Left, right? Hinkins. No, you're getting another one.
Well, I don't have one, but I kind of want to jump in on one that it sounds like Senator McKell has, that you mentioned on how do we know what's true? Is that what it was?
Yeah. Here, pass it down. It's got my name on it. Read the whole
I don't know if when it comes
There's an
to
analogy in the question.
when it comes to digesting food, our bodies are naturally able to tell what's bad and the body gets rid of it. When it comes to digesting information given us by elected leaders, assuming a small percentage is bad, how can we as voters distinguish when leaders are not telling the truth? Oh, okay. All right. So that's a little different than what I thought. There you go. It's all yours. No, I think that's a valid question, though. It's important. Like, one of the things we try to do is we try to determine truth. And we do that as elected officials. You do that when you're talking to elected officials. I think one of the best ways to do it with an elected official is just to have a conversation with them. I think far too often we make assumptions on people's intentions as they talk and they say things, and you see things in the news or whatever your chosen media source is. And it's really hard to judge intentions of somebody else. An example I would give is one of my dear colleagues, Phil Lyman. Oftentimes he'll vote and he's like voting with the Democrats. And you're like, what the heck? But if you talk to him, he's got a completely different reason than the Democrats do. Although sometimes he's got the same reason as the Democrats do. And so understanding why they would do that is kind of important. So I would caution against judging intentions before talking to an individual, and I think the face-to-face conversations are really important. I do think on a broader picture, on a broader scale, this is a really big issue, and it kind of goes back to civility and some of those other things. We live in a world where we have more information at our fingertips than in any generation in any given time, but sometimes we're the worst consumers of information ever. And we have a tendency to go to the echo chambers that repeat what we want to hear over and over again. And so it's important that we challenge our information. It's important that we listen to other sides, talk to your neighbor who thinks differently than you. And I'd also say, like, sometimes it's important to read the bill and not just the headline of the bill. So.
I also want to forgot I have this, sorry, to say that we want to be respectful of their time, so they will answer the rest of their questions that you have been giving them here, and then after we get back to Representative Burton, we'll go back down this way with their wrap-up. And then all of you who have additional questions can meet with them afterwards for a few minutes. But we appreciate their time, and we want to make sure that we're being respectful of that.
We're going to jump in on you a little bit this morning. We got started a little bit late. We're going to go another like 15 to 20 minutes. We have
That's including all the questions you have, and your wrap up is still 15 to 20 minutes.
All right, let's.
So are we starting?
Oh,
You don't want a question? Jump in here.
oh, I got. No,
Yeah.
I'm fine. No, one of the questions that was asked earlier, and I just want to elaborate on it. Mike McKill and I are sponsoring a bill. He's the Senate sponsor. I'm the House floor sponsor. It's regarding water. Just be aware, we are working very hard with the Colorado River Authority. If you don't know much about that, that was established back at the turn of the 20th century, and when water was plentiful, and every state was given a certain amount of water. That water no longer exists based on what's been falling out of the sky. And so we're working very hard to make sure that Utah gets the water it deserves. If we're not careful, the knives are going to come out from some of the lower basin states, and you'll start seeing lawsuits. And so we're doing what we can to make sure we're prepared for that. This particular bill has the water authorities measuring water a little bit differently than we normally have, usage that is, so that we coincide with the way other states count usage. And we'll be in a better position if we have to defend those water rights. And then finally, the other one is mental health. I'm big into mental health, and if you've been following what's going on since the pandemic, which many of us could say now, and the rearview mirror was a manufactured problem in some respects, maybe some overreaction on the part of government, it has had a major impact on the mental health of our citizens. And it's a concern. If you need mental health counseling right now and you want a psychiatrist, you're going to wait at least a year to get in to find somebody to talk to. It's terrible. And so some of my colleagues that are sponsoring bills that increase access, I know Norm Thurston's been involved in that, we're trying to find a way to increase access to mental health by allowing out-of-state practitioners to do online counseling. And there's a medical school in South Utah County. How many of you knew that? It's going to be bigger than the University of Utah Medical School. It's right there on Provo University Avenue exit. You can see the building going up. They're going to have more students than the University of Utah Medical School. And others in the body are doing things like Corey, our friend down in Lehigh, has run a bill that kind of leverages IHC to provide residency positions for these medical students so they will stay in Utah when they graduate. And right now, Utah is 49 out of 50 in the nation for doctors. That's terrible. If you try to get into a specialist lately, you know what I mean. So these are some of the initiatives that are being worked on the Hill to take care of issues. Do you want me to finish, just close out?
No. You're going to have time to close out.
Okay.
So don't worry.
I'm not worried.
We're going to just give everybody a chance to answer the questions, then come back to your own issues.
Okay. A question was another one about housing affordability. What are we doing in the state to help with housing? That phrase, housing affordability, means a lot of different things to a lot of different groups and a lot of different individuals. On one spectrum, it represents housing affordability with our homeless population, or with our very low income, or with renters, or with first-time home buyers, or with retirees. So as we divide housing affordability into each of those different segments of populations, there's a series of bills and requests for allocations that are going forward. There's a commission on housing affordability that represents all the different entities in the state. They've been working on this issue that I have the opportunity to co-chair from the House side for about this last year. A lot of different ideas that are flowing forward, but they're falling right into 3 different bills. I'll mention those names to you because they're going to come out this week and start going through committees if you're wanting to follow along, and as you're looking at it, to provide your input because it's a big issue that needs everyone's involvement. The first one is HB 406. That's Land Use Development and Management Act modifications. How's that one for a title? Woo! The second one is HB 364, Housing Affordability Amendments, and the other is SB 174, Local Land Use Development Revisions. And so the underlying purpose of these bills this year is to primarily do 3 things. One is to reduce regulatory barriers at the local level that limit housing affordability. So trying to be able to just reduce regulation, so as Representative Thurston said, we can get more houses built through the free market throughout the state. The second goal is to identify tools that facilitate market-based solutions. So we still need to honor and represent and account for a free market and capitalism, let the market drive, and so be able to have that happen within the state. And then to also support options to increase housing in rural Utah, because there's a lot of need in those areas. So that's with housing. And I know my time is short, it's already finished, but I'll mention Social Security taxes. There's a whole options here for tax cuts this year. One of the options that are being discussed and debated right now with a lot of input is Social Security tax. I think it's a great one for us to eliminate. Personally, for me, it's a double taxation from my perspective. It's really hitting retirees hard. And so if we can reduce or completely, my hope personally is to eliminate the Social Security tax completely. That would be something that will be beneficial for us. So those conversations are happening right now to see if we can completely reduce it or completely eliminate it. So thanks for asking.
And I'd say one thing, I get a lot of emails about the Social Security tax. Right now, there's an exemption up to $62,000. One of the proposals would bump that up to $80,000, which is the vast, vast, vast majority of people out there. I've got two questions here. One question is pretty technical. SB 129, I'm assuming that's probably your question back there, judiciary amendments. I'm looking at Judge McVeigh maybe. Whoever has that question, come talk to me about that offline, because I haven't looked at the substitute yet. So, okay, so let me jump in with a question that I am working on. I think we call the lobbyist the hallway. I think I've employed about the entire hallway on this issue. Are you concerned about the mental health of our youth and the impact of social media? Yes, yes, yes. Social media is incredibly harmful for our youth. I think everybody knows that at this point. You saw the Surgeon General last week came out and said kids 13 and under just simply should not be on social media. You saw in the State of the Union address, it's a bipartisan issue. President Biden called out social media companies. Congressman Stewart, extremely conservative congressman, is now working on the issue. We have a serious problem with mental health. When social media came online, it was almost like a hockey stick with our suicide rate, our depression rate, and what is the most difficult thing for me is when I see these kids, our girls take a bigger hit than our boys, and it's a substantially bigger hit. When I see youth on Capitol Hill, I always remind the boys to be nice to the girls. So I've got a bill dealing with social media. I'm going to encircle that and move that through the Senate and hopefully get some support in the House over the next 2 weeks. What my bill would do, it's going to require verification. I want to make sure that parents are involved in the process. If you're a parent and you're willing to let your kid go on social media, we want to verify that. We originally started with some prescriptive language that would have required a photo ID, but we're going to change that, and we're going to do it through rulemaking. But I want parents involved. The second thing is no data collection on our kids, no targeted advertisement to our kids, no data collection on our kids. I'm going to require social media companies to have parental control tools that can be used. And finally, I'm going to include a private right of action. They're not super excited about that, but it gives us a little bit of leverage as we negotiate. But I've met with Twitter, I've met with Meta, I've met with LinkedIn. Catherine Heigl, different issue. Thank you. But it's a big issue. If you've got anybody in this room, here's what I'm going to say. This is a parent issue, but we are failing. And any parent that thinks they know exactly what their kids are doing online, you are a way, way, way better parent than most. Okay? Because most parents literally have no idea, and we're going to tackle it. But Norm, you're the worst.
I have a question here. This is neither of these are things I know a ton about, but I'll do my best. PPP money was taxed at the Utah. Many other states didn't. Comments on that. So when businesses got the PPP loans, those loans were forgiven, which the accountants tell me when you have a loan that's forgiven, that's revenue. That's the same thing as revenue. And so Utah taxed that as revenue. And we had looked into trying to figure out what do we do with that? Do we not tax that as revenue for Utah corporations? Ultimately, there was not enough support for getting rid of that one because it kind of opened up a rabbit hole of all the other things that we might not want to tax. And the preference was, well, instead of just doing this, let's just cut the rate overall. So this got rolled up into the larger discussion because that when we talk about an income tax cut, that's also on business taxes. So when we're going to go from 4.85 to whatever it is we're going to go to, 4.65, 4.75, whatever that ends up being, that benefits everybody across the board. So that's what happened with the PPP tax in Utah. The idea was, look, let's not try to micro-target specific benefits or specific things. Let's just have a big chunk of money. What does that end up being? $400 million tax cut for the rate reduction? Yeah. Something like that. And that just helps everybody. So rather than pick and choose, we're just going to put a big roll up in there. So that's what I understand happened with that PPP question.
Okay, last question I have with our terrible winter air quality. What more can we do to make our transit more accessible, like free fare and bad air days? That's actually already in place. We have some free fare days. Last year, they experimented on, I think it was February, and I think we're planning on doing that again as well too. So like these bad air quality days, the transportation's running anyway. Let's get cars off the road. Additionally, we have funded double tracking of transit through the Salt Lake area, and we're looking on moving transit all the way down to Payson, so you can get people off the roads and they can take public transportation that way. But yeah, it's certainly a concern when we look at our air quality. I mean, historically, even prior to cars, we've had bad air, and we had cars on the road, and it just kind of traps that down. So we need to do more. We're looking at more ways, and transit is one of those partners. It already exists, and so we've been utilizing that.
All right, let's, free fare is this week as NBA All-Star games are in Salt Lake, and so free fare is around the state. Let's start with our wrap-up. Just take a couple of minutes. Let us know if we haven't asked a question that you want to address it now, or any of your other legislation that you would like support of. Let's just start with Representative Welton and come this way. And then again, any other questions that we didn't answer, you can come up and talk with them afterwards.
Okay, thank you all for coming out. I think one of the great hallmarks of our country and our democracy and our democratic republic is the ability to get together and have conversations and to be accountable to our public, to discuss our positions and why we stand where we're at. I will say the process is a mess, and sometimes it's a little frustrating up there. But having gone through 2 sessions, I think we do a really good job of getting it right and taking care of the concerns. We talked about some bills that have had multiple substitutes on them to get them to a good place. Sometimes it's a better place. Sometimes politics is the art of the possible, and it doesn't always end up the way that we want to, but sometimes we take what we can get. And sometimes we get it wrong, and we can go back and we can fix that. One thing that I want to talk about, 2 bills. The first one's just kind of funny. This bill took on a lot more legs than I thought it would, and that's the golf course water transparency bill. It's been on the news a few times. I don't know that that's going anywhere, but certainly looking for a piece of the puzzle in dealing with our water issues. The other one that I'm looking forward to working on, and it might be Representative Burton runs this bill across the line with Senator Ipsen, but we have a shortage in our law enforcement officers. We've got a huge shortage. We have fewer people coming in, and we're also hiring people that we wouldn't have necessarily looked at 5 years ago. And so I've got a bill that would try to encourage more people to go into law enforcement and also create a higher caliber by essentially what happens is if they stay in law enforcement for 5 years, we will pay for their college costs, whether it's criminal justice or diesel mechanics. We don't really care. We want them to go out and to be kind of working through something that's difficult and not lose them between 18 and 21 years old. So that's something that I'm excited to be working on. Love to talk about that more offline. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. I want to just mention 2 things. One, I think you've figured this out. We as legislators, we're expected to know everything about anything about everything. The reality is we are all a mile wide and an inch deep. So we can fake it on most questions for at least just to give you a reasonable answer, but we rely on each other for that depth. So we kind of know the issues, we've seen the issues, but when it comes down to, if I need to know something about coal power, I call Dave Hinkins. If I need to know something about criminal defense attorneys or personal injury stuff, I call Mike McKell. If it's military benefits, and you can see we've got this broad base of representatives here for South Utah County. We know a lot together, even though we don't know that much individually. Second thing I wanted to just kind of wrap up on, I didn't really get a chance to talk about public education funding this year. What are we doing? I hinted that we're doing something with flexibility. We're looking at probably close to $600 million in new ongoing funding for public education, which is huge. That is if you're familiar with WPU, a 1% increase in the weighted pupil unit, which is the cost of educating a child, is about $40 million. So if we're talking about $600 million, we're pushing 12, 14% increase in the WPU. When I first started, we were fighting to get 2 or 3. So that is a huge amount of money that could be available for public education. And that's including choice, that's including kids going to charter schools, lots of other options as well. The other thing that we are doing with public education is we are focusing this year on, we're going to trust the districts. We want to maximize the amount of money that goes down to those local school boards. And we've told them, they already know, this is not a surprise to them. We're going to expect them to step up and show us that they really do have great ideas and creative ideas for taking that money and doing something that benefits their community. In fact, even at the school by school or even grade by grade level within their districts, we expect and know that they will deliver that promise to us. So I'm looking for great things out of public ed this year.
One of the questions was about when tax and Social Security, and sometimes we take Social Security for granted, and people spend all their time worrying about whether they're going to tax it. They better worry about if it's still going to be there. And so I think, we need to spend more time with working with our federal agencies and stuff to make sure that we do that. And one of the questions was how well do we interface with the federal as far as the representatives and senates. And of course, we don't get along with them very well over public land issues, as everyone knows. I represent the areas that has the monuments, the Bears Ears, and the Grand Staircase and all that. That's in my Senate district, and so I was quite involved in that. But a few years ago, Representative Stratton and myself we were the chairs of a committee that we appropriated money to the counties. Every county got some money to put a state. So what we've done is tried these land management plans that we have. It's actually interfaces. We took the federal regulations because they weren't adherent to their own bylaws. And so what we've done is our state was made up from every county had their books that we had put together, and basically it covers all the federal registers of how they should be managing their forests and their they own 66% of our property here. They manage it very poorly, and we really have a hard time getting along with them if that's that part of it. But we do get along well with our federal delegation, especially our congressmen. They help us with the issues, and we are getting along better than we have in the past, especially with considering that we've. I probably shouldn't go much deeper than that, but as I just think that we are working with them to try to ensure our watersheds are better protected, that they're actually hopefully trying to get timber contracts out to get a better watershed for us, because a lot of the water that's being held up going into the Great Salt Lake is being held up because of all the conifer forests along the hillside that takes up all the snow, and it never hits the ground, and so it goes off in evaporation and never does make it to the lake. But they've not allowed any of this. They don't allow timbering, and they just they don't allow management, period. It's just basically, and it's kind of one of the more, it actually sees more people in that canyon than they do in Arches National Park, which is 2.5 million people a year to 3, and so there's a lot of people going there, but they don't manage it, and so I think that we need to work with them, but we need to make sure that we elect the right people. So thanks.
Thank you, Senator Hinkins. I just want to wrap up by saying I appreciate the team effort, and we have a good team on Capitol Hill. As you look across our delegation here in South Utah County, we are very, very unified. But our team is much broader than that. So Senate District 25 that I represent is from Provo to Santaquin, and I can tell you we've seen a lot of folks from Provo on Capitol Hill. Mayor Kafusi's team has been on Capitol Hill. This week I saw Mayor Packard and some members of the City Council from Springville. I seen Mayor Mendenhall multiple times. I've seen some good folks from Salem, Mayor Wright, and we had Mayor Olson here this morning. Brandon Gordon, Commissioner Gordon, snuck in the back, and he's with us this morning. And we've got President of Rocky Mountain University, Cameron Martin, snuck in the back. And we collaborate and we work really well. And one of my other team members I've been fighting with a little bit this session is Sheriff Smith. He threatened to bring Chuck Norris on a bill of mine, and I told him I'd bring Ted Nugent to fight it out. But in all seriousness, one of the things I think that sometimes we miss is how well we do work together, and it takes all of us working together. As I go into these final 3 weeks of the session, my number one focus, I'll just say, I mean, it's clear, I'm going to be working on transportation. I worry about South Utah County looking like North Utah County. They grew too fast and the infrastructure wasn't in place. And whether we like it or not, Utah County will have over 1 million people at some point in the near future. It'll be in my lifetime, and it's coming when we like our kids. I like my kids. I hope they find a way to live here in the future. So I'm going to look at that. I appreciated the comments from Representative Thurston. And when he says we're not that smart, I mean, he went to Princeton. So just take that into account. I mean, Norm Thurston is gifted and brilliant, but some of the numbers we saw in education, I just wanted to throw this out there. Our analyst, Brian Bean, is really smart. He's looked at the dollars. I mean, Norm mentioned $600 million. We did a lot for teacher salary. There's a lot of legislatures that are still meeting right now, but with our salary increases this year, our Utah teachers, if our numbers are right, we're going to be ranked 19th in the nation. We'll be the highest rated Republican state in the nation, and that's something that I'm really proud of my colleagues in the legislature for doing. It's not perfect, and by the time the other states do some funding, we may drop, but we have made huge progress, and we're really proud of that. So thank you for coming this morning. Thank you again to Revere. Scott Barlow is a champion. He's part of our team, and thank you to Nebo.
Thank you. And going along those lines, wanted to thank all of you for your involvement, for being here on an early, cold Saturday morning when you could be doing other things. And we're here talking about our communities and our state to be able to make it better. So thank you for your involvement. It's just an honor to be able to serve and work with all of you. This is truly a team effort. As Senator McKellen and others have said, your involvement is critical. I don't know all of the details on every issue in the state, but I know that there are experts out there that do. For example, in law enforcement criminal justice this last week, there was a bill that was coming through. I need some help and clarification, so in real time, texting and email the chief of police in Mapleton and Springville, providing that input in real time to be able to represent what would be very best for our local communities here. This last week, we had Nebo School District board members up there. We've had city council members, we've had mayors, and just not adults. About 2 blocks from here is Brookside Elementary. There were 60 fifth graders that came up with parents and teachers this year. And so having the children there and the kids there and having them ask hard questions is fabulous, and helping them be able to understand the process. So this is really a true team effort, and also important to be transparent and accountable to what's happening as well. So appreciate the opportunity to gather so you can ask good questions. And also in reports, for those within the district I'm able to serve, send out a weekly report of what's happening on different bills, my voting record every week. And so I can be transparent and accountable, and so we can work together. One of my favorite parts of the House chamber is where the Speaker of the House stands and presides. Just above it, there's a Latin phrase. And I grew up on a farm, so I'm really not well versed in Latin, but I think it is pronounced well, vo populi, something like that. Something. Thank you. See, I grew up on a farm here.
Club president for 4 years.
Okay, excellent, excellent. That means the people's house. So it truly is the people's house. I'd invite you to come up to the Capitol. Come up and give a tour. We'll give you a tour. Sit on the House floor with us. Come and participate in the committee. But just thank you for your involvement, for being here this morning.
Thanks, everybody. And as you can see, these are wonderful people. It's a pleasure to work with them. We don't always agree, but we get along, and we find ways to respectfully disagree. If there's anything positive in government lately, the last many years, it's the involvement of the people. This is a team sport. We are not elitist by any stretch. I'm your neighbor. I suffer to pay my bills just like everybody else. I feel the same pain that you do. serving in politics should be painful. You shouldn't be personally enriched by being in this role. And I could all my friends here would agree it costs us money to be in the role. But we're here because of love. We're not here for money. We love our citizens. That's why we serve. Government has two functions, and that is to provide safety and security for the people. Those are the two things that government cannot fail at. The rest of this stuff is important, but it's ancillary to safety and security. And so we strive to make sure we do that in the state of Utah. We have a crisis right now in our corrections department, if you've been following that on the news. And so I'm going to be heading up a task force to get into that. I did that in the Army somewhat, and so I have some experience there. But we've got to work together to help law enforcement, to make it a profession to be proud of again instead of one to be ashamed of. And that's really sad that that's happened in our country. So that's a big emphasis I have. We have a Utah County Legislative Caucus. I want you to know about that. We meet every week. We have 23 legislators in Utah County. We're doing the very best we can to come together so that we're moving in the same direction. We have to be united as Utah County continues to explode in growth. And so we're trying to do that, to leverage that power we have to get the infrastructure and the things we need here. Finally, I'm on the Federalism Committee, and Senator Hinkins hit it. But I don't know if you knew this, but the federal ownership of land in Utah was always meant to be a temporary thing. The federal government promised to give that land back to the state of Utah. 66% is owned by the federal government. It's not accurate, it's not right. So we're forcing or putting some pressure on the Attorney General to do a lawsuit. Now's the time to do it. We have the best Supreme Court we've had in a long time to listen to a lawsuit like that, to give us back some of our land. And finally, last thing, 45-day session. It's fast and furious. It should be that way. California meets year-round, and they get in a lot of mischief and a lot of trouble. They spend a lot of money. Doing it this way, we get tired, but we don't spend as much money and we don't get into as much mischief. So with that, thank you for being here today, and look forward to talking to you after.
All right, thank you. Thank you all for being here. You see, we have a diverse legislative body representing us as South Utah County. They're willing to ask and answer questions on your behalf. They're willing to take a look at all sides of the issue. So make sure you do communicate with them. Their emails and phone numbers are out there. If your question was not answered today, please come forward and they will meet with you individually. I'd like to thank our sponsors again, Revere Health with Scott Barlow for the breakfast, and Zara, she's the one who coordinated all this year. Also our three chambers for their effort to get the word out, and then also our school district to allow us to have the facilities. Next year we will be back at the school district offices, so be looking forward to that. If our legislators will put the dates and times that are chosen in their newsletters, the chambers will get that information out, and so will the city. So be looking for that. If you are interested, as you heard Representative Burton say, we have 23 legislators in our valley. Next week is what they call Eggs and Issues, which is a county event similar to this that's sponsored by the Utah Valley Chamber. And so if you are interested in more of the county aspect of legislative issues, it will be next Saturday, February 18th at 8 a.m., and it will be at the Colliers International office in Pleasant Grove, right there off the freeway. If you want more information, just let us know. Again, thank you, legislators, for all you're doing. For those of us who are up there all the time, we appreciate your efforts and your ability to hopefully bring legislation that's beneficial to the state of Utah. And with that, we will see you again next year.